everyone. Welcome to the C Team. This is Mike Curley.
And this is Frank Curley.
And it's been a while, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a little while. You got a new job. And we're just kind of all over the place.
Yeah, we've been busy. Hard to get studio time when I have to commute into New York and out and depend on New Jersey Transit. And believe me, I could rant for an hour on that, but we don't have an hour, and you don't really want to listen to that, do you?
Well, why don't you start by telling us your best endorsement for NJ Transit?
It hasn't killed me yet.
See, there you go. He's still alive.
Yeah. All right. So we are talking some happier news today. We are talking about Deadline.com announced or released an article saying that the Dresden Files had been optioned by Fox 21 TV studios for a TV series. Now, most of you listening to this know us personally, so you know we love the Dresden Files.
Yes.
And for the one or two of you that somehow managed to get here, welcome aboard. I'm sorry for the disorientation. We're a little weird. But the Dresden Files, of course, is the novel series by Jim Butcher. He's a private wizard detective in modern-day Chicago. So not only does he find who done it, it's more of a what done it, and how the hell do I stop it from killing me done it.
So it's like Clue, only more explosions.
Yeah,
and fire.
Yeah.
The mansion would be on fire at the end of this.
He would solve the case, but the building is not left standing.
Yeah.
All right, so to get right into it, this was Tuesday. Was it Tuesday? No,
yeah.
Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Monday we saw the news, and we're very excited about it because, again, we love the show.
The book series.
Yeah, we love that too. Love the book series. And the next day, Jim Butcher on Twitter tweets a very cryptic, "Don't believe everything you read on the internet."
And this is after I basically got done with this outline. So,
so we're doing it anyway, so we don't waste Frank's effort.
Yeah, we had another episode of mine, but yeah, that's more Halloween related. We'll do it in a couple of weeks, and be scrambling, you would have gotten a half-ass episode, and we don't want that.
Yeah, instead you're getting your standard issue 3/4-assed episode, because I am half-assing this.
Okay.
So, anyway, so we don't know for sure that this is happening, and even if it was legit news, it's only been optioned. They haven't produced a pilot yet. No series has been ordered. So this is like the very start of the process.
Yeah, like it's in the womb, but it's like the first second. So we don't have a director. We don't have a star. We don't even have a stunt coordinator. We don't have anything except the people with the money.
Yeah, we have the producer, and that's Eileen Maisel, which we act to, just to make sure, because we do our due diligence. We looked up how to actually pronounce Maisel, because I've never actually seen that name before.
Yeah.
Working for, and I'm really not sure on the pronunciation here, Temple Hill Entertainment.
That was a tough one. I could feel the effort for Temple Hill Entertainment.
Watch that actually be how they say it.
So a little history on Fox 21 TV studios. Originally,
you may remember them from.
Yeah, you might remember him from whatever Troy McClure was doing. Now, so Fox Television Studios with we'll name the two shows we actually watched from that. Malcolm in the Middle, which was a really good sitcom,
fantastic show, just a brilliant show. I heard it kind of maybe went downhill a little bit once the baby was born, but I kind of stopped watching after that for unrelated reasons, so I can't really judge it at that point.
Well, I kind of detected it as, the jump the shark moment. And since then, they had the one brother go to Iraq.
Really?
Yeah.
The older brother, not like Reese or something, right?
Reese
went to Iraq? Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm
kind of glad I stopped watching at that point then.
So yeah, I think I picked a good point to say, all right, jump the shark, moving on. And also the other show that I could think of, under Fox 21, not quite Fox 21 TV studios, company entities are weird, but we watched Beauty and the Geek, which it was a couple laughs.
It was not as crappy reality shows go. It was not terrible.
Yeah, I can think of some funny lines from that, honestly.
Yeah, speaking as a couple geeks, I kind of appreciated the nod at least. But anyway, so that's who Fox 21 Studios now. Now they do some crime drama shows, which actually
makes sense.
It makes sense as far as Dresden goes, because yes, wizards, yes, werewolves, yes, vampires, but at its heart, it's a film noir detective story. It just, instead of the story being resolved with, you did it. Here come the cops. It's you did it. Oh shit! I need a silver bullet. Somebody, anybody.
It is very much the hard-boiled.
Yeah, very hard-boiled.
Yeah,
very
even once you find it, you're going to at least have a fist fight.
Very Humphrey Bogart, circa Casablanca. So if they're doing crime drama shows, that kind of slides kind of sideways into this.
Which does give me a bit of hope. They have worked with Netflix for a couple of those shows. So,
so this might not be a on Fox or on FX production. I think if it goes on Netflix, that's going to get them, if not the HBO money, then at least the HBO freedom of content.
Yeah.
Because it's not quite Game of Thrones, but there's plenty of blood and guts and nudity in the Dresden Files that it may not be necessary, but you want the option.
Well, we'll go into this a little bit later, but it doesn't have to be a slasher, but it can't hold back where it shouldn't hold back.
Right,
is what we're saying.
Okay, so and our producer Eileen Maisel, she worked on The Golden Compass, which from all reports I've seen was at best kind of and a production of Romeo and Juliet, which is kind of cheating because you already have the script.
Yeah, and was it the 300th adaptation?
That's lowballing it.
Yeah,
especially if you consider high school play adaptations.
So at least we have a producer willing to give fantasy a try.
Yeah, I mean, it would be kind of silly to give your Private Eye Wizard to somebody who doesn't want to do fantasy. And I think, especially from Game of Thrones, fantasy is on the way up again, or at least it's on a high.
Yeah,
and of course we have Temple Hill Entertainment, which probably the weakest link here with Twilight, just because Twilight. I don't think I have to understand why I think Twilight is bad.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the general consensus if you're not a teenage girl.
Okay. But Twilight is a fantasy series, for all
it's not the same kind of fantasy.
Yeah, I don't mean to excuse Twilight.
Let's not dwell on Twilight any more than is absolutely necessary.
So the other thing that I've personally heard of is Fault in Our Stars, which is a film adaptation by a novel by John Green. I have seen neither. I've read neither, but of the little list we've piled up here, this is probably the one with the most consistent, positive critical reception.
That's high praise for the studio.
Yeah, and from what I understand, it is a really good book and movie. So there's that.
Okay,
and then we have.
It was just never. It was not exactly my speed.
I basically heard of it, from my girlfriend. So there's that. In the Vlogbrothers, they started off basically just giving each other vlogs, just talking about random stuff, and their fame just kind of grew from there.
Okay, and the other movie that we cared about is Power Rangers, which I did not have high hopes for. To be honest, Power Rangers I loved it when I was a kid, but it's cheesy and stupid. So I did not have hopes for it to do any better than, say, Transformers. But from what I actually heard, I have not had a chance to see it yet, but from what I've heard, it's actually a pretty decent movie. Yeah. It's not blockbuster great, but it tells a decent story. The graphics aren't terrible. And I've heard good things about it. So Temple Hill Entertainment is kind of teetering toward good. I think if you take Twilight off of that scale, it goes a little higher toward good. And I think they've learned their lessons, most of us, about Twilight. So the pedigree so far, I'd be happier if it was HBO and Spielberg. But I can work with this, But I mean, the last time it was Nicolas Cage, so I'm
open to surprises, and we are dealing with a mixed bag history. But the director of Ant-Man, before he did Ant-Man, I just want to point out he did was a really bad comedies like Bring It On, but then he made Ant-Man, which is pretty good. So I'd say we give him a chance. I mean, hopefully they'll find the right director.
You give everything a chance. So all right, so what do we actually think of the prospects? I kind of want to, before we get into that, the actual original series of the Dresden Files, it aired in 2007, executive produced by Nicolas Cage on Sci-Fi Channel. Yeah. He's a big fan of the series. The Sorcerer's Apprentice?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
actually.
I've heard Jim Butcher, I believe, said that so far that's like the closest to a movie adaptation of Dresden that exists. I've seen it. It's not a bad movie. It takes some cues from Dresden as far as like the magic being related to physics. But okay, so I'm going to talk about that series a little bit. It is not the same as the books. There's one episode. It was originally intended to be the pilot, so it's a little weird compared to the others, based on the first book, Stormfront. And it follows the plot for the most part. Marcone is not in it. He's the mob boss that's kind of at the center of a lot of plots, but he's just not in it. So that changes some of the motivations of the characters. But it hits most of the beats where the hearts are exploding. Dresden is dating the reporter. He has to hit a demon with lightning. And he's got to rush there because he's the next target. So that's a spoiler for a book that came out 15 years ago. But anyway, aside from that episode, it really did not have a lot in common beat for beat with the book series. That said, I think as far as themes go and as far as how the world works, I think it was reasonably accurate. I liked what they did with Bob. Bob in the books is just a talking skull.
He was probably the best part of that show.
Yeah,
back.
The skull can move, but he's just a skull. In the show, what they did, it was Terrence Mann, I want to say.
Yeah, I believe, yes.
Yeah, Terrence Mann, who they cast as the voice originally, and in that Stormfront episode, they did have him as just a skull. They took it out because the show, that episode aired like 8th out of the like 12 episode season. And by then, they had Bob as a ghost that did take the form of a well-dressed British man who is dripping with sarcasm. Mm-hmm. So by that point in the series, they couldn't go back to him just being in the skull. So that episode suffers a lot from where it was moved to because they cut out all the scenes with Bob, which cuts out a lot of the connective tissue in the story. Makes it a little harder to follow, and some things just don't make sense.
Yeah. But probably the greatest blow against the series is it just didn't have the budget.
Yeah, it had the mid-aughts Sci-Fi Channel budget, which was not great.
No.
Stargate, their flagship show, had great CG, and this was clearly not a flagship show. It was maybe a couple steps above. Well, you know what? I'm going to be a little fairer to it. When you had obvious stuff like a dragon or like a big monster, then it suffered.
Yeah.
For subtler effects, like the smaller spells and things like that, it was pretty adequate. And it did some interesting things with the magic as far as the theory of how it worked and things that Dresden did with it were really creative. He didn't do a lot of blasting because, again, no budget. But
no budget, no explosions.
But the way he used it to investigate were clever and interesting ways that, having played the Dresden RPG and read all the books 3 times now, I'm going to do another read eventually when he gets around to the peace talks. I'll talk about that later.
You should read Lord of the Rings during that time.
Anyway, it's things I can see working within the same framework as in the books. So as far as, and there are things that, if you just view it on its own, it's decently entertaining. The plots are decent. The writing's not too corny. I mean, certain practical considerations. Writing about a 6'9" man getting in and out of a Volkswagen Beetle is a lot easier than actually filming it. So that's why they gave him a Jeep. I kind of like the hockey stick and the drumstick as his wand and staff. And there are things I like about the series. So I kind of look back fondly on it because I actually watched it when I was very first getting into the Dresden series. So I still picture Morgan and Murphy, especially, as they appeared on that show. And as they appear on the show is nothing like they're described in the books. Morgan's an old white dude with a beard in the books. In the show, he's like a smooth-looking young black guy. Murphy is short, blonde, and Irish in the books, and she's Hispanic in the series. So it's all kinds of cognitive dissonance going on whenever I read these things. But I digress.
But yeah, I kind of had the reverse thing where I knew that, say, Bianca was going to be just a complete psychopath at the end of her arc in the books, and then they turned her into a sort of romantic interest in the show. I found that a little weird.
I think what they ended up doing with her in the show is they kind of combined her with Laura and a little bit with Susan.
That makes sense.
Because they didn't get as much into the vampires in the series, partly because they didn't have time. The Black Court shows up once, and the only thing that you know about them is they don't get along with the Red Court, whereas in the books, they're like whole different species of vampires with whole different rules, the main commonality being that they suck blood. But other than that, it's just like a totally disconnected thing.
Yeah.
So that's my kind of recap of what I'm going to call the Nicolas Cage series. Because why not mention Nicolas Cage?
Maybe he should play Dresden.
He wants to. I would bet you anything that he would love to. I think that's why he took on the Sorcerer's Apprentice, so he could play as close to Dresden as he could.
I can see him in kind of like that desperate at odds where he's not Superman.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage, he's fun to watch, but he does not need to be every superhero, and he desperately wants to be every superhero.
Well, I'll quote Roger Ebert. He's a good actor in good films, but a nigh indispensable one in bad films.
Yeah, there are movies that are only watchable because of Nick Cage. So he's got that going for him. Okay, so there's my digression about the Nicolas Cage Dresden series. So, Frank, what are your thoughts on the news of the possibly, maybe upcoming series?
Well, I kind of feel I already said that. It's really hard to judge at this point. So, yeah, judging by the various studios and producers, here's hoping. It's not the most optimistic route. I mean, again, someone in there was willing to give fantasy a chance in the past, and then we have a lot of crime dramas. My biggest concern is, are we going to have the budget to have Harry Dresden or Nicolas Cage, whoever, riding a T-Rex through Chicago? Once we reach that point, once we can do that, I'd say we're going to have a proper show.
Well, that's going to happen if it happens. We're talking like 7 or 8 books down the line. So I would do it like 7 or 8 seasons, by which point, if it's gone that long, maybe it's got a better budget. Also, CG will get easier by then. I would think it's been getting easier year to year. The certain things like a certain deer in The Walking Dead notwithstanding.
Wait, what happened with the deer?
There's one episode of The Walking Dead where a deer shows up and it looks like they ripped it from a PlayStation 1 game. It's just terrible.
You need to show me that.
I don't know if you could take it. In a show about zombies, that's the worst thing you can see. It's just like, oh god, that friggin' deer.
From the PS1 era.
Just look up Walking Dead deer and you will see something. It's like clearly this is like we were talking about the expression bottom of the barrel. They punch through the bottom of the barrel into the dirt for this deer.
Just this World of Warcraft deer.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So okay. So I personally would have preferred HBO to get this because of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, they've shown that they can throw a budget behind a fantasy geek series. And I like the concept of having a season to a book. It lets you really develop things. And especially the Dresden books get longer as you go. They get more complicated. So you could do like a 6-episode first series, first, second, even third series. And then like the 4th and 5th book, you start expanding it maybe like to 8 episodes, to 10 episodes as the books get longer. So you could kind of like ease it in there. And also, like HBO has more freedom in the sense of if you do a show on one of the networks, they're going to order 26 episodes. And that's constraining because then you're going to end up with filler. You're going to end up, if you try to do a book a season with like 20 episodes, you're going to end up with so much filler. HBO has the freedom to decide on an irregularly sized season just to what fits. You know what? I would also say Stars because of American Gods, which has a lot of similar themes to the Dresden Files, especially the later books, as far as old gods doing new jobs. It's a little different interpretation of Odin between the two books, but it's a very similar theme in the sense of, in the Dresden Files, the old gods are still around, but they've slotted into different positions because they have to. And that's something that American Gods does. So I could see Stars doing it. I don't know much about like the Showtime shows or Cinemax shows. So I would have preferred HBO or Stars. Again, also so that you're not constrained by standards and practices in what you can and cannot show. Not that I think Dresden needs a lot of nudity, but I think it needs the freedom to go into that if necessary. Because, a lot of these things, a lot of like your shapeshifters, your vampires, whatever, they transform, their clothes don't, and that would take me out of it. The werewolves especially, they got a whole thing about that. Okay, yeah, this book 2 with the werewolves, it'd end up with a lot of naked people. So that's another reason it should be on HBO.
I guess my thing about HBO, from what I understand, they have a tendency to want to like push more like explicit content on the shows. Like HBO just kind of mandates that, and
I could see that because that is part of why you would go to HBO, because you could show stuff like that.
Right, but I mean, like I think from what I understand, in the Game of Thrones series, they add a few where they weren't there before. And from what I understand, it's pretty indicative of HBO. And it was one thing not to hold back. Is another thing to like just add gratuitous sex scenes for little reason, except for keeping the mature rating up.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I would not want to see a bunch of gratuitous stuff. Although some books, I mean, there's a book where he's on the set of a porno for most of the book,
and that one club.
Yeah, and
there is
the White Court Sex Vampires Club. So yeah, there are areas where it's only going to make sense if there's naked people, but yeah, I would not want to see just gratuitous.
Yeah.
So also, I'm kind of optimistic because of the Nicolas Cage series. Jim Butcher, from what I understand, he has mixed feelings about it. And I would like to think that experience has taught him lessons about how to pursue it now. So I would presume he's going to, look for a better contract, more creative control, something more accurate to his vision. So that kind of gives me a little bit of hope that it's a second go around. He's not going to be drawn into the same things. The same mistakes are not going to be made that might have been made with the first one. Not that I'm saying he made mistakes, I don't know who made mistakes, but there were mistakes made because it only lasted one season.
Well, I think the word we're looking for, as far as Jim Butcher is concerned, is inexperience.
Yeah, because it was his first time doing a TV show.
And he probably thought, all right, everyone here knows what they're doing. And then we have every mystical creature just a tall guy in trench coats.
Yeah. So, now, I think it's a natural choice for adaptation because they've always kind of had a comic book action movie feel to them. So I think it's a very good fit for a TV adaptation. So I hope they do it well. I think they're going to do it well, partly because, I'm not going to say they screwed it up before, because like I said, I enjoy the series. I enjoy the Nicolas Cage series. So I hope it's better than that.
Yeah. It's a good jumping point.
Yeah. I'm on the Dresden forums, and there's a whole thread about people who came to the books from the TV show. So it did its job of drawing people in, and it was entertaining enough that people did say, "Oh, I want to see what's behind this."
Okay. Now, the other possibility beyond premium channels is, of course, as we mentioned, Netflix. And honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing it being an animated series because. The problem with CG, even nowadays, as we've seen from that deer, apparently, it still sticks out like a sore thumb when you don't do it right. I feel, fully animated series, like everything's on the same plane.
Yeah, to kind of go off on that point. The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Chronicles of Narnia. C.S. Lewis, when he was alive, forbade any kind of live action adaptation of his work because he believed it would not be believable. He only wanted adaptations to be animated for exactly that reason. Everything would be on the same level, so everything would look like it fits together. It wasn't until, I want to say, Jurassic Park that his estate let anybody even get started on a live action adaptation, because that's the point where it became, okay, we could do this. Okay. So I see what you're saying, and I agree.
Yeah, and there is still a problem with CG. CG, as we've learned in Jurassic Park, looks best at a distance.
Yeah.
And every single close-up in that movie was like an animatronic puppet. And it looked great. Like, you know, the Velociraptor's head, you know, kind of like lifting up with the plastic thing. That's all happening.
Yeah, the T-Rex, that was what surprised me, that the T-Rex, they had a full model of that. I thought that sucker was just too big to have done that. And apparently the thing came to life when it got wet. Scared the hell out of people.
Yeah. And so there's still kind of that problem. Like, Justice League had a little bit, like, the CG on the main villain definitely stood out. Marvel had been a lot better with it.
Yeah, they made a conscious effort, especially with Thanos, to make him like the most believable CG villain that had ever been on screen, and it works.
Yeah. And, well, we had Jurassic Park. Then we basically had executives going, all right, just CG it. Yeah, that's a shortcut to everything. And that's why we had so many examples of bad CG up to that point. And and I could see how that could be a very easy attitude to delve into. So,
yeah.
You know, another reason why just make everything animated.
Yeah. And I will say, just because I like to defend Michael Bay, he does a lot with practical effects. He does not go to CG unless it's absolutely necessary. So that I can respect, and he knows how to shoot action sequences. There's a lot of criticism that can be made for his movies, but the visuals are rarely among them.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would like to see an animated, maybe not Dresden, but anyway. But especially on Netflix, there are two particular shows. I've watched one. Frank's watched the other. I watched The Dragon Prince this last weekend, and Frank has watched Castlevania.
Yes.
And Dragon Prince, it's a good series. I liked it. It's a little the animation itself is a little jaggedy, which they claim was because they wanted to look old school, and they said they're going to improve on the second season. But it's a good example of an animated series that can be made on Netflix that you couldn't necessarily make on Nickelodeon, because it is still kind of like a kid or young adult series in that, like, no one's getting stabbed on screen except one giant worm. But it's kind of a step from Avatar: The Last Airbender toward Game of Thrones, because like the first 3 episodes are about a king being assassinated, and they make it clear he's dead.
Now, I have watched the first 4. Me and Eva got hooked into it. And, yeah, I do agree. There's a weird change in frame rate.
Yeah.
For like, the character phases. When everything's moving fast, it looks great.
Yeah, there's the jaggy low frame rate for some of the animation, which they said they're going to fix for the second season. The official line is it was to make it look like old school animation. The unofficial line is that there was budget concerns. But it's a good series in the vein of Avatar, because it's made by some of the same people as Avatar. And in fact, the main male protagonist is voiced by the same guy who voiced Sokka in Avatar. So that's a good one. Castlevania, I'll let Frank speak on Castlevania.
So yeah, Castlevania, they went with a harder R than I thought they would, because let me explain. Back in the old days, when we still doing like the Metroidvania, stuff before like the Lords of Shadow games came about, I always felt the tone was more the Van Helsing movie.
Yeah, very PG-13 kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there is blood. You are dealing with a vampire, but there's a kind of like campy, like heroic tone to it. But here they just went all out. Like there's one
almost like HBO Spawn.
Yeah, it's one particular shot in particular. Demons are attacking the city, slashes this one woman, and she's still standing. And then you get a close up on her face. It's horrifying.
Great, I'll just watch it right now before I go to sleep.
Oh, yeah. Do it right now. I'm sure you'll get fascinating dreams. And this, more than any other feature, has given me hope. Because Mike and I have discussed maybe like an animated Dresden Files show in the past, but we didn't think an American studio would ever do it. Now we have this show that doesn't give one shit about blood and violence. And one thing I realized watching this, a lot of adult-oriented animated features up to this point have been a comedy and satire. Those were the only successful ones, really. You had Fritz the Cat way back in the day, which is NC-17 and satirical. And then you had Simpsons, which, for TV was pretty mature. And then you have South Park, which cranked it up even more.
Yeah, South Park is mature, back around to the point of being immature.
Yeah. And then, and I saw someone say that, Sausage Party somehow, broke the ceiling. But then I realized this is basically just what South Park did, only in full 3D.
Yeah, it's gross out comedy in an animated feature is not groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Groundbreaking is telling mature stories with mature elements in animation, which I would argue kind of the DCAU and Batman the Animated Series started. Because that especially Mask of the Phantasm, that's a quality motion picture. That it's the animation ghetto sunk that in the theaters, but that's an example of a series that I would love a Paul Dini, Bruce Timm Dresden Files, because I think they know they could do it maturely as well as anybody, as proved by the DCAU in general. Yes, it was on like Fox afternoon, but especially after it got on Cartoon Network, they told some very mature stories, and the only thing that separates it from like a PG-13 movie is that they didn't actually swear. They came close a couple times, but it's always like, go to laser blast, things like that.
Yeah. So Castlevania above any other, anime feature in the West, I should say. Japan doesn't give a crap.
Yeah, in Japan, Japan just treats animation as another medium to do to make entertainment in, which I think is the way to look at it. Animation opens up a lot of avenues, like we said. You can draw anything, but finding the right place to film, finding the right people, and CGing whatever you can't, that's just more effort. That's more logistics as opposed to draw it on screen.
Yeah, and even with Mask of the Phantasm and other bigger films like Beowulf, the attitude of treating animation as an adult medium is still kind of marred as kid stuff. And Castlevania is giving me hope. It is successful. The second season will be coming out right on Halloween, which will be nice.
Of course.
And yeah, put it on Netflix. All else fails, put it on Netflix. Get a good animation team, and I think you could really bring the Dresden Files to life. You
know what you should look into? There is an animated series, a mini-series of Constantine.
Okay.
Which is very Dresden-esque. If Dresden was a British smoker who hated everybody, it would be Constantine.
Not stepped on by everyone, just hates everyone.
Oh, he stepped on by everybody too, and that's kind of why he hates everybody, but he steps right back and gives you the finger. Constantine is...
Is that on Netflix?
No, actually, I think it's on like the CW or something. Whichever series... I think it's whatever channel actually had his live-action show, which is, again, a decent adaptation that just didn't last. But there's a lot of overlap in the urban modern fantasy there. Now, for my money, if we're talking about animation, I would rather see Codex Alera as an animated series, because it is kind of Avatar-ish. If the Dragon Prince is Avatar with a step or two toward Game of Thrones, Codex Alera is like a halfway point.
Yeah.
Where it's got a lot of the mature fantasy blood, guts, and nakedness, but it doesn't go toward like the kill everybody excess that George Martin does.
Yeah. It is war, and it does treat war with the maturity it deserves. But it's not like merciless.
Yeah, it's more it's a step away from Game of Thrones and toward more comic booky, old school pulp where there are characters that are going to die, but 5 or 6 are going to make it to the end that you know of.
Yeah. And between Dresden Files and Codex Alera, I think I like Codex Alera more. Just a personal taste.
I get that because it is a complete story. It's a very tight story where it's clear from the first book that he knew where he was going in the sixth. Whereas Dresden, he does have an end plan, but you can kind of see the seams where he set something up in one book, and then when he gets to that next book, he's changed his mind, or the story has evolved in some way. It's not a bad thing, but the bad thing is, Codex Alera was done in 6 books, bang, 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 and we're good. It's a good series. It's over. It's done. It's complete. Dresden, the last book came out, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
It's still doing better than George R. R. Martin.
It is, but it's a consequence of doing a 20x book series is that, it might not make it to the end, one way or another. So that is a consequence. There is a reason I also like Codex Alera. I am a big fan of a complete story.
Yeah.
I think a story needs to end. It's part of the reason I do not read modern comic books. Story does not end. It just gets rebooted. It gets all the character development is over because a writer liked what he read when he was a kid and wants to bring that back. But that's a rant for another episode.
So yeah, we'll talk more on adaptations another time. Yeah, I think next time, costumes.
Yeah, we're going to talk about costumes in and out of games.
Yeah, in and out of games. And whatnot. So yeah, I guess we're done.
All right, so I'm Mike Curley.
This is Frank Curley.
This has been the C-Team.
Signing off.
I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I want to get into